Welcome to Light Overheat with Professor David Yamani. I'm coming into 2025 hot with a throwback to one of my first and most popular videos, Light Overheat number 6, which talked about AR-15s, so strap in. So a colleague recently asked me about the number of people who own AR-15 rifles and the number of AR-15 rifles that are owned in the United States. And you would think that there would be plenty of information available about this, since it is one of the most commonly owned firearms in the United States, and firearms owners are not exactly a vanishing breed in the country. And so I think what is really happening here is that the politics of guns may be getting in the way of our ability to collect good data about this. And also, it's not entirely easy to ask a survey question that gets at this type of rifle. But I think if there was more of an interest among scholars in finding out how many people own how many of these rifles, better efforts would have been made to this point. But there's an element of the gun studies community, I think, that really is not really wanting to publicize just how commonly owned these firearms now. Now, in Light Overheat number 6, I talked about some results from the National Firearms Survey conducted by Professor William English of Georgetown University. It was a very popular video. Obviously, it's an important topic that a lot of people are interested in. But I wanted to record a new video on this topic because I wasn't entirely happy with the way that William English characterized his work to me, who funded it, why it was done, and so on. And I'll put a link to some news stories that have since broken about Professor English's work. I don't think that the scholarship itself is horrible, but certainly the way he asked the question about AR-15s, which was, have you ever owned an AR-15, is not the right way to ask a question, right? We don't really need to know who all has ever owned, although this is somewhat interesting perhaps as a secondary question. We kind of want to know who currently owns these kind of rifles. And perhaps surprising to some viewers of this channel, I think some of the best research from this is from a poll that was done by the Washington Post and the polling firm Ipsos. So in the fall of 2022, using an ongoing knowledge panel of respondents that Ipsos has constituted, a sample of gun owners was drawn. 2,104 gun owners were surveyed, and one of the questions they were asked was, what types of firearms do you own? And so 80% said they owned handguns, 62% said they owned hunting rifles or shotguns, 16% said they owned antique firearms, and 20% said they own AR-15 style rifles, including any semi-automatic weapon built on a common AR-15 platform. So trying to be rather precise in the wording here, but also encompassing enough to get those people who are like, I don't own an AR-15, I own a Bushmaster XM15, or whatever goes on in the mind of a survey respondent. And so 20% of the gun owners in the Washington Post Ipsos survey said yes, they own that kind of firearm. This amounts to 5% of all Americans, or 1 in 20 Americans owning these types of rifles. Right? If we think that there are about 80 million gun owners, then we're talking about 16 million owners of AR-15 style rifles. And, you know, I think we should always, again, treat these estimates of gun ownership, especially particular types of guns, especially guns that are vilified by certain people in the population, as kind of the low estimate of what the reality is. So I would always say something along the lines of at least 5% of Americans, or at least 20% of gun owners, or at least 16 million people. And I think that is safe to say. Now, they report, of course, that there is a margin of error both for sampling and also for design, so it's plus or minus 5%. So, again, these are estimates. They give us a ballpark idea. I'm not going to bet my life on the exact numbers we're talking about here, but it gets us going in a good direction. And I think the conclusion that William English was really trying to drive at for his sort of political and legal purposes, that these are firearms that are in common use in the United States, is pretty safe to say. Why do people own AR-15s? According to the Washington Post, they divide major reason, minor reason, or not a reason. And protect self, family, and property is 65% of respondents said it's a major reason, 26% say it's a minor reason, so only 8% of people say that's not a reason. The second highest number of respondents say it's fun to shoot. So 63% say that it's fun to shoot is a major reason, 27% say it's a minor reason, and only 10% say it's not a reason at all. And the last reason I think that I want to highlight is target shooting, right? So 60% say target shooting is a major reason to own an AR, 30% it's a minor reason, and 10% say it's not a reason at all. And I want to add one more observation, and that's that 18% of people who own AR-15s say that hunting is a major reason that they own these rifles, and 30% say it's a minor reason. So, you hear a lot of times from gun skeptics or people even within the gun community who don't like ARs that no one hunts with an AR. Well, I don't hunt, so I'm not going to judge, but that's the numbers that the Washington Post Ipsos poll reported. Now, a second source of information about how many of these guns are in circulation comes from a National Firearm Survey, not conducted by William English, but conducted on an ongoing basis by scholars at Harvard and Northeastern universities. And here I'm drawing on this article that was published in the Annals of the American Academy of Political and Social Science, the number and type of private firearms in the United States. And here again, the authors are really trying to isolate from among all the guns that are owned, how many of them are AR-15s or AR-15 style rifles. Now, they don't do this perfectly, but again, it gives us, I think, a reasonable estimate. I think they made a good faith effort to try to get an answer to this question of how many AR-15s are there in circulation. So I'll put up this graphic that I made here when I was reading. This is from the 2019 version of their National Firearms Survey. So at the time, U.S. adult population of 255 million people, they identify 25.5% of respondents as personally owning a firearm. Again, I think that's an underestimate, so you can treat all of these numbers that follow as a minimum estimate, right? But they determined then there's 65 million gun owners in America, right? I think it's probably more like 80 million. But they also find in their work that the average gun owner owns about 5 guns, right? So in their logic, if you multiply the number of gun owners, 65 million, times 5 guns per owner, you have a total gun stock of 326 million guns and some change. Again, I think many people also think that there's maybe more like 400 million guns in America, so you can adjust these percentages accordingly, either in your own piece of paper or in your own mind. Okay, so among those guns, they find that 55% are long guns and 44% are handguns. Okay, among the long guns, 63% rifles, 37% shotguns. Okay, among the rifles, here's the distinctions they make: bolt action, lever action, and semi-auto. Okay, so 40% of all the rifles are semi-automatic rifles, and then they make one final distinction which you may accept or not. I think it's okay, roughly, right? They distinguish between military semi-automatic rifles and hunting semi-automatic rifles. Okay, they find basically a 50-50 split there. Now, recalling that many people also use their AR-15s for hunting, right? Maybe it's not exactly a 50-50 split. Again, a minimum estimate gives us a ballpark starting point, right? So if 50% of all semi-automatic rifles are military style semi-automatics based on the gun stock of 326 million guns, we're talking about a 22.64 million AR-15s as a minimum estimate, right? So, the adaptation of my saying guns are normal and normal people use guns, right? So here we would say AR-15s are normal, right? And normal people own AR-15s. There are tens of millions of AR-15s owned by many million normal American gun owners. So hope you find this information helpful. I love to hear your comments. I know this is a controversial subject. I'm trying to bring light over heat to it, highlighting the kinds of research that I draw upon with the caveats that I've mentioned. They are starting points. They give us some ballpark estimates. And if anybody ever asks you how many people own how many AR-15s, now you have something that you can at least point them to. If you know of better data than these on these questions about ownership of AR-15s and number of AR-15 style rifles, please let me know. I'm happy to post an update to this in order to continue to clarify the matter. As always, if I bring some value in these videos, please subscribe to the channel. Please suggest the channel to other people and let me know your thoughts as always.